Our top story: markets rallying on the U.S. China trade truce, a 270-point gain. The Dow futures right now, but gains across the board of 1% or more on all three major market gauges. The futures there in this shortened trading week. The two sides making concessions at the G20, with Washington agreeing to not impose any new tariffs and will let American companies sell high-tech equipment to Chinese telecom giant Huawei. For its part, Beijing would buy more American farm products. President Trump commenting on his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping yesterday.
President Xi and I had a fantastic meeting. It's a great meeting. We get along. We also have a really good relationship. And he wants to see something happen, and so would I. And I think there's a really good chance of that happening. We had a great meeting.
Joining me now from the Asian Studies Center at the Heritage Foundation, Senior Research Fellow Dean Cheng. Good to see you, Dean. I should point out that all of what we were talking about is what the U.S. is giving, what China is giving, is just to get these trade negotiations back on track. Where do you see this heading from here?
Well, frankly, I'm not sure we're going to see as much progress as I think the markets are hoping for. The reality is that the core problem, that of Chinese lack of respect and stealing of intellectual property, hasn't changed, hasn't really been addressed yet, and it's been the sticking point in U.S.-Chinese negotiations over the past year. So I'm waiting to see what, if anything, Beijing does to reassure Lighthizer and Mnuchin that the Chinese are really going to change their policies with regards to intellectual property.
Dean, what should we be looking for on that note? Are there any signs or kind of guideposts that we should be watching?
Well, the Chinese demand has been that the U.S. actually drop tariffs at least back to the 10% level across the board before we will see any motion by the Chinese. So I think something from them, at least an agreement as USTR Lighthizer has asked for, which is a signed guarantee that if they fail to come through, they understand that those tariffs will spring back.
Let's move on to, we mentioned earlier, the United States, because this is a very important point in the negotiations. The U.S. agreeing to let American companies sell high-tech equipment to Huawei. Their chief security officer, Andy Purdy, was on this program last week commenting on the ban. Listen to this and I'll get your reaction.
People don't understand the way the United States government works if they think any agreement between the U.S. and China is going to eliminate all restrictions on Huawei's ability to do business in the United States. We will not be allowed to do business unless there are strict government-monitored risk mitigation processes. A trade deal is not going to affect that. Secondly, we do not want and we do not speak for the Chinese government, and they don't speak for us. We still welcome the opportunity to talk directly with the U.S. government to work out these proven risk mitigation measures.
Dean, the fact that Huawei is involved in this trade negotiation, I know that Bob Lighthizer has sought to keep Huawei out of the talks. The president views, according to reports, largely looks at Huawei as both a bargaining chip and a commercial challenger to the United States, but a grave national security risk, according to many people in the administration. Do you see this as an opportunity for the U.S. with this kind of waiver on Huawei for the time being, or a mistake?
Well, I think that providing the waiver certainly provides a little more negotiating room, but it unfortunately also muddies the water about the national security aspect versus the trade aspect. But I also think that for vendors as well as potential buyers from Huawei, I think everybody understands Huawei's been put on notice, and you buy at your own risk and you sell at your own risk. So, you know, where Huawei's going to be in the American IT ecosystem 3-5 years from now remains to be seen.
And we've also, with the work of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, put our allies overseas on notice as well. Do you expect more pressure to be applied on that front, even as the trade negotiations continue?
I think there will be more pressure from the United States, but I think, as important, a lot of our allies and friends abroad are looking at Huawei independently, and they're not liking what they're finding.
Right, the back doors that essentially, whether you're a private company or an ally or a nation, a back door in which essentially the Chinese government can go in and steal information and gain access to telecommunications.